You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guests about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. Today we return to the Netherlands, specifically Eindhoven, with an opportunity to speak with Cristina Popa, Customer Experience Program Manager at Philips. What intrigued me in her background was the blend of process expertise and customer experience. It's actually at the origin of the branding of my own company, EX for CX, Execution for Customer Experience. I knew Cristina and I would find common ground. Cristina grew up in Romania and has now lived in the Netherlands for so long that she joked with me that she is more Dutch than the Dutch. The blending of cultures will be fun to explore with Cristina as well. Focused on customer experience, and especially finding a way for companies to go beyond the, quote, bumper sticker feeling of customer experience and into enterprise capability for customer experience, Cristina ensures the creation of repeatable, great experiences, not just an ad hoc, Herculean effort for the occasional customer. We're going to find out more about how she does that. Cristina, welcome to CX Passport.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for having me on your podcast, and very happy to share my story with you and your listeners.
It's going to be great. I'm so excited to have you on today. So I mentioned this in the intro that you and I share this blend of process and customer experience focus. Tell me about how that blend helps you enable enterprise-wide capability for customer experience.
Well, I think everything started with continuous improvement and lean. And there, if you don't have a process, then your work doesn't exist. If you don't have work instructions, your work doesn't exist. So that's the starting point of establishing the standard. Okay, how should the standard look before we can look at improvements, before we can look at expanding capabilities or creating new capabilities? So I worked with Lean and the teachings of Deming, Six Sigma, and Zero Defects for quite some time in my job. So that's kind of stuck with me. And I also brought this to the customer experience capability part, where, okay, putting a process in place is the first step into creating this and mapping the customer experience.
It's the first step, but I'm curious about how blending the two worlds, because sometimes we hear, okay, the OpEx people, the process, the Six Sigma people sit over here, and then the customer experience people sit over here. But as you and I have talked about, it's really I certainly have that belief that the two worlds need to coexist so that it's a repeatable, great experience. How are you seeing that process work that you have from your background really help the customer experience world in the repeatability of great experiences?
Well, as I said, putting the process in place and determining what steps need to be done, what instructions should be followed is the first step. But that's pretty much the overlap with continuous improvement, because in continuous improvement, so for those who are familiar with it, you're measuring times, you're measuring objective things, and that's not always the case in customer experience. And in the world of today, I like to see myself as building the business process for the customer of the future.
Okay.
So, if before we would measure the time that the call agent would take to handle a customer service request, now I'm not sure if the customer wants to talk with us or even wants to call us. He just wants to have stuff done. So that's a different perception and a different mindset that we are building in the process.
I think that you talked about something in there, that measurability. That is one thing that is quite a challenge, or can be a challenge. And we're going to talk about some of that a little bit later. I want to get into some of that ideas that you've shared with me around scores and that aspect of it. But how much of it isn't necessarily measurable, and it does come into not gut feel. I don't mean that people are just guessing here, but it is how do we find a way to apply a discipline to something that, well, guess what? We're humans. Humans are messy. Humans aren't always the most repeatable. And that's where I do think the two worlds find themselves complementing them very well, that the art side of customer experience combining with the discipline side of customer experience, combining with the analytics of process improvement. It's very good. You know, you had talked to me about that bumper sticker idea. And I know, and we've seen them. We have seen companies that say they're focused on customer experience, but their actions say something completely different. And I would love to name and shame several airlines that are probably the most guilty of that, but I'm choosing not to. I'm going to be kind today. But that bumper sticker approach that, we care for our customers. We're there for you. You're the reason that we do what we do. Customers can sniff that out a million miles away. So how do you enable a true culture of focus on the customer and not the bumper sticker version of it?
Well, I think the first step is to look at governance and have a discussion on who actually owns the customer experience.
Okay.
So that's I think we are what you see in normal corporations or big companies is that you have a marketing officer who is in charge of that side of customer experience, and from the ivory tower gives orders to the company on, okay, this is a direction where we should go and this needs to happen. But from my perspective, and also this is also something that I'm applying in my job, is to enable everybody in my company to own the customer experience.
Okay.
Philips is healthcare company, heavily regulated. So then, just as the quality is everybody's responsibility, mm-hmm. the customer experience follows the quality. So everybody has this mindset of, okay, everything that I do in my job, be there an office job or a factory or distribution or whatever, impacts the customer, their patients, their families of the patients. So, it doesn't matter if you're producing a form in an office or you're building a magnetic resonance equipment, it has an impact on the end customer. So with that, you trigger something in people that, first of all, they were themselves in situations where they have to visit a hospital and be confronted directly with something not going wrong.
Right.
And they realize much more what is their impact of the customer in their day-to-day work.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
There's so much that you layered in there that I want to just take a moment and almost absorb for a second, because there's some, I have never really thought about how so many companies will say quality is the responsibility of everyone. Or if you go to a factory, you'll see safety is everyone's responsibility. And you'll see that theme. I don't know that I'm seeing that customer is everyone's responsibility in that same vein. And I like the way that you've tied that to that world. I do think there's a danger in if everyone owns the customer, then no one owns the customer. But that idea that the customer is what every single role, whether they're creating that form or designing the MRI machine, to why they care for the customer. I love that. And then that last area that you spoke of, I think that is such an important thing that I want to emphasize, and that is especially in healthcare. I sincerely believe that patient experience would be so much better if those that are responsible for creating the experiences that we go through as patients actually were patients. If they went and sat in a waiting room, if they filled out, and the Byzantine version of the U.S. health insurance experience, And if more people had to actually experience that worked for those companies, they'd realize what a nightmare they have created for the patient. So Cristina, that idea. So let me ask, how do you help encourage that at Philips? Are you getting people out? Like, is part of what you're doing is help drawing people out of their offices and into hospitals, into doctors' offices?
Well, I think that is a part of the culture. So, culture, you don't get to change a culture by just putting a poster on a wall. like you do with the quality,
Well, you don't change it. The posters don't work even for quality, but yes.
Yeah. So, then you have to bring it personally to the people themselves and make them understand how their work is impacting the customer experience.
Yeah.
So that is one, building it by design in their work and helping everybody tie their work with the impact on customer experience. And a second one is also the support and the buy-in from leadership.
Okay.
So here we have metrics and KPIs that are trickled down from the CEO to the reception lady in the building on, okay, how do you measure NPS in your job, and how do you make an impact? How do you move the needle for our customers to be happier with us?
See, that's absolutely, that's such an important thing. And you know what's funny? I talk about this on the show a lot. This is a theme that comes up a lot. Getting people out in front. I just read on LinkedIn today being the 8th of August, that Qantas Airlines is asking its executives and managers that are in the headquarters to go out and be baggage handlers right now as they're dealing with this labor crunch and all of that. But even outside of a labor crunch, we talk so much about how important it is to get people out of the office into the front lines. I don't know why it doesn't happen more often. Is it inertia? Is it, well, they actually have their day-to-day jobs that would get in the way, but it seems to be so smart, and I'm going to say it's so easy, maybe that's an exaggeration, to do that. Now, I feel like that's related to something else that I want to ask you about, because you are very much about action, not the bumper sticker, but you talked about the ivory tower idea as well. And yes, it's important to have the executive leadership that you're describing, but a lot of times these ideas are generated in conference rooms. They're generated in the ivory tower. But how do we get these ideas of customer experience, these initiatives, into the front lines? What are some of those stories that you've had where you've had these challenges to overcome to get from the ivory tower to the sustainable, great experience in the front line?
So there I would like to quote a team member from the North American team, where red is the new green in regards to KPI. So what that means is that if we don't have the courage to recognize where we are performing poorly, then we also cannot improve on it and make it better, be there the process or the experience or the business in general. So what I saw in the past is that from customer feedback, in the surveys, in communication, there was a very strong, and I'm just taking one example, it was a very strong feeling about the packaging that is not sufficient, that products are coming broken, etc. So what the business did is put another box in another box in another box. Well, you can imagine what happened next, huh? Because that big box with just one product reached the hospital, and the nurse was not happy because they have limited storage space.
Yeah.
They cannot lock the rooms, and it took like 3 days to find the package in a hospital in between 20 departments. So just taking the feedback from the survey as such and improving on it obviously didn't work. So that's learning by experimenting. And that's how we have right now a two-way approach of, okay, the customer feedback from the surveys and from what is coming in communication is one, but let's also test that with customers and actually ask them what they want and how would they like to have things. So that was maybe common sense, but revolutionary for improving customer experience on a process level.
You have said that what I think is, there's probably too many silver bullets, magic bullets, but it is exactly that. You know what? Hey, do you want to know what the experience? Ask the customer. Because I can totally see that happening in some packaging room. Great. The customers have complained about the damage. Let's overprotect the product. And that this is a great idea. And I can see that designed in the conference room. And if we never ask the customer, we'd never know that nurse on the ground says, I don't have a place to put this stupid Matryoshka doll of packaging, right? I don't want to do all of this garbage. And forget about, we're not even talking about the actual waste associated with what we're describing. So the idea of using, voice of the customer to be able to understand what the customer experience is and get out of the ivory tower. Absolutely. You've said a lot of key themes there. Get out of the rooms, hear the voice of the customer. I love it. I want to switch gears with you a little bit here. And I know that we talked about that you've moved from the Netherlands to to the Netherlands from Romania about 11 years ago. And I've got to imagine that had to have been a fascinating cultural experience. What was that move like?
Oh, man, where do I begin?
Well, I can't answer that question, but I guess.
So I think the first difference was in space. And if, from a North American perspective, I think people are used to big spaces, large houses, and even in the cities, the houses are quite large and comfortable.
Okay.
In the Netherlands, the people per square meter is, I think, the highest globally.
Really?
So we have something like, you can drive through the Netherlands from the south to the north in about 2 hours. Mm-hmm. But we have 19 million people living in the Netherlands.
My goodness.
So, yeah, so you have different concepts that enable the, let's say, pleasant living of so many people on a very small space. So that was the first shock for me, because again, I'm not necessarily American, but in Romania we also have a lot of space. So there's this space freedom that if you choose so, you can isolate for weeks without having to see anybody for, a 3-kilometer distance.
Nice.
So, that was the first shock. And the second one is maybe the Calvinistic way of being.
Tell me more.
In the sense that they have here a saying, don't do yourself so crazy because I'm doing myself crazy. So don't exaggerate so much because I'm crazy enough, in that sense. So it's, following the norm and behaving according to expectations in society is a heavily regulated type of society.
Okay.
Where if you are in, let's say, in an apartment building, then you most likely have neighbors that are going to control the safety, the security. They're going to know exactly who went where, what type of car, what did they do, those kind of details without too much effort. So that's ingrained in the city life, I would say.
Okay.
So that's the traditional part of it. And then on the other side, you have the multicultural international community.
Oh, yeah.
So Eindhoven is a sort of the Silicon Valley of Europe.
Oh, okay.
And you have here, you have Philips, of course. Eindhoven was Philips. So if you visit the city, you will see the places, the neighborhoods of the city that were former Philips factories or Philips villages where the employees lived that were until 50 years ago blocked for the public access.
Mm-hmm.
And also the spin-offs like ISML, the chip producer, and all other kinds of innovative companies that are established here. So you have areas where you can taste the whole international, you can go on an international culinary journey in just one small street.
That is fantastic, Cristina. Now, little change of pace here. I'm thinking about the walking down the street with all of the different food options, but I also think of just the Netherlands and the Dutch in general have always been a very kind of global traveler, very seeking the world, and you're living in that cultural now. Well, sometimes all that travel can wear you out. So why don't you join me here in the First Class Lounge? Let's take a break. We'll move quickly here and have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
From my past, I would say most Bristol in the UK.
Yeah.
So the industrial new built city, the new architecture and structure with old cultures.
Oh, nice. I like that blend. That does sound nice. Now, thinking the other direction, what is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
I would say the Asian part of Taiwan, Vietnam, okay. Those small Asian countries that have amazing food.
Yeah, food clearly is showing up through a lot of what we're describing here. So what is a favorite thing of yours to eat?
Well, I'm Romanian, and I'm not sure if you know, but Romania has a quite. I stick by my Romanian cuisine. So it's a mix of Turkish, Russian, Italian, Mediterranean.
Oh gosh, it's all mixed in. That sounds wonderful. All right.
Yeah, so if you visit Romania, you have to really be careful because the locals there are gonna feed you and until you get diabetes and
well, conditions. I'm not really rooting for diabetes, but I don't mind being fed by the locals, so I like that. Now, let's go to the other side here, Cristina. What is a thing your parents forced you to eat, but you hated as a kid?
Vegetables in soup. So there I was a very picky child, and I would create all these kind of conditions for my parents that, okay, if I have a tomato in, then somebody had to pick it up. If I had parsley or those kind of aromatic herbs, those were a no-go for me in soup. So my mother really had it tough with me. With soup and also fish.
It is funny how hard we made it on our parents. And I know that it all comes around. My children are older now at the university level, but they certainly gave me some grief when we tried to introduce them to foods that they didn't like. Now, back to travel. What is one travel item, not including your phone, that you will not leave home without?
Most likely my e-reader, because there I have my collection of thousands of books.
Cristina, the book, absolutely. I had a guest on the podcast. I'm forgetting exactly how many episodes ago now, but she's responsible for a lot of in-flight entertainment. And I think back to a world before we had all of our TV screens and planes, and yes, getting lost in a book. But I still find myself getting very lost in books. I was thinking about, we talked about this earlier in the show about metrics and the art of customer experience and that aspect of it. But, much of process and experience work does require that we understand metrics and analytics. And one of those favorites out there is NPS. Now, I just need everybody to know, I am 100% fine with NPS. This isn't another one of those NPS is dead discussions, but NPS is just a score. Action is what matters. So, Cristina, how do you really listen and act And how have you broken that cycle of just survey and score?
Well, NPS is important, and I think all the business world is using it, be there willingly or not. But I think NPS is just an indicator. Okay, are you doing good or not? Mm-hmm. But it's not really something that you can directly take action on. And from my perspective, we have right now working with text analytics and artificial intelligence and machine learning just to make sense of the big chunk of data that we get in. So that is creating a sort of a structure of combining the NPS score, but also customer sentiment and the specific explicit feedback that they gave in order to trigger actions at the various levels. So that is one part of it. A second is also looking at overall experience, how that is linked to the performance. Ideally, you would like to collect all that data, link it to performance, and then have a clear conclusion backed up by data that you can take a decision.
Yeah, and I like that it's not that you're saying, hey, we're getting rid of data, right? That it's just a score, and so we're not going to do anything with it. You're talking about let's weave together other data elements. But then I also heard, let's take that customer sentiment. Let's take those customer verbatims and really get a sense of what is actually driving this number, because the number itself is of no value. I'm looking and I see the clock that we're getting close to the end of time, but I got one more thing that I want to ask you about. And it is this evolution of a company's maturity to getting to delivering great experiences repeatably. Because you think of a company that's just getting started. I know Philips has been around for a long time, right? But a company that's just getting started, some of the way to deliver a great experience is that Herculean, let me try that again, the Herculean effort, that one-off, right? But eventually you've got to move through that journey. And it takes a while to move through that. So how have you seen, Cristina, companies, and even if it's at Philips or before, how do you keep them energized going through that journey of customer experience maturity?
Well, I think here it's a matter of, first of all, establishing a model where you look at, okay, what is the baseline and where do we want to be? What is poor and what is outstanding? And have that perception very good understood by all the players. Second, to look at Philips. So Philips basically brought customer experience as a concept from the 50s. So you reach a level where you hit the glass ceiling and you have to reinvent yourself. So a company that is 130 years old, it's they needed to reinvent themselves in order to reach this level. And what they started in the 50s with the customer experience around the product. So light, colored light, images, and sound became the ambient experience of Philips. So try to even new companies today are trying to recreate that.
Yeah.
So there's a big legacy behind it, but the trick is, okay, how to disrupt ourselves and innovate ourselves in such a way that we can delight customers and actually have them buying another product with us before the current product is already not even at the end of the life cycle. So that's the kind of experience, and it's just being very mindful of putting the action where it should lay, making the measurement where it should be. So if we're deciding on a model of maturity, okay, we're going to measure it and do that regularly and see how much did we grow from one period to another. So it's just a matter of discipline and understanding very good the model.
I like that. Let's set up the model, but then you said something in there that I think that's important, and I want to make sure that I emphasize it, and it is the reinvention of it. That the journey is not just this static, okay, increasingly slowly. People get bored. And so the idea of how do we reinvent? How do we make it fun? How do we, whatever it is, how do we change and be different? I think that's an important folks to think about as they're going through their customer experience journey of, change, mix it up, do something different. And I'm not here, and I don't think you are here either to tell the listeners, and this is what you should change it to, but rather just have that willingness to realize that what you did yesterday is not necessarily what you need to be doing tomorrow, and have a little creativity and fun with it. Cristina, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for talking with me today. If folks want to get to know a little bit more about you or a little more about Philips and the approach to customer experience there, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, I'm pretty vocal on and visible on LinkedIn, so okay. They can just reach to me on LinkedIn, and we can pick it up from there. Otherwise, also reach to other customer experience colleagues from Philips, because we are all willing to share our story and the good stuff that we're doing.
Awesome. Well, Cristina, I will get that into the show notes so that folks can look you up there and find you there on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for sharing your journey, both just your overall approach to customer experience, your drive to action, your blending of process and the customer experience, telling the stories of how it happens there at Philips there. And I'm so glad that you did make that journey 11 years ago to share some of those cultural differences with us. It's always fun to learn and expose ourselves to new cultures. Cristina, thank you for the conversation today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Rick, for having me, and wish you good luck with your future podcast.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. Make sure to visit our website, cxpassport.com, where you can hit subscribe so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, you can check out the rest of the EX for CX website. If you're looking to get real about customer experience, EX for CX is available to help you increase revenue by starting to listen to your customers and create great experiences for every customer, every time. Thanks for listening to CX Passport, and be sure to tune in for our next episode. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.